Okay, cheers everyone and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Cheers.
So today we are going to be uncorking a topic that's super relevant to anyone really involved in the wine world or even those just interested in it.
Yeah, for sure.
The big question we're tackling is, what are the absolute essential marketing strategies that small wine producers really need to know to thrive?
Exactly. And we've got a great mix of information to draw from for this deep dive.
Yeah, so we'll be looking at the key strategies from PPPP. That's our main source for today.
Right.
And to give us that real-world insider perspective, we'll also be weaving in insights from a sommelier with tons of experience.
Yeah, that combination should give us a super clear picture.
Exactly. And the goal here is to distill all of that down to the most valuable, actionable knowledge so that you listening can understand not just how small wineries survive, but how they can actually really flourish in what is, let's face it, a pretty competitive industry these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough business for sure.
So whether you're a producer yourself, a dedicated wine enthusiast, or just someone curious about the business side of things,
Right.
this deep dive is designed to give you some really valuable takeaways without getting too bogged down in the weeds.
Absolutely. We'll keep it practical and useful.
So let's get right to it with a point that might surprise some people.
Okay.
We all know that making amazing wine is the foundation, right?
Of course.
That's a given.
You got to start with good juice.
Exactly. But for small producers in today's world, it's often really effective marketing. That's the key to not just staying afloat, but actually building a truly successful and, long-lasting business.
You can have the best wine in the world, but if nobody knows about it,
Right.
it's not going to sell itself.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's unpack this a little bit. Why is marketing so vital for these smaller wineries?
Well, think about it. They often have very limited resources
Right.
compared to those big corporate wineries.
Mhm.
And they're operating in a globalized marketplace that's incredibly crowded and competitive.
It's noisy out there.
Yes, super noisy. So they need a way to cut through that noise and connect with the right people.
And that's where marketing comes in.
Exactly. And it's not just about shouting the loudest.
Right.
It's about crafting a very clear message and then delivering that message to the people who are most likely to actually care.
Your target audience.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
without that clear communication, even an exceptional wine
Mm-hmm.
might just get completely lost in the shuffle.
It's all about standing out, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Standing out is key.
And our sommelier contact actually really hammered this point home.
Yeah, they know the market inside and out.
So from your experience, what are some of the most effective ways that small producers have really differentiated themselves in the market?
Well, I've seen some really clever approaches,
Mm-hmm.
and the most successful ones really tap into what makes them special and unique.
Right.
So one powerful angle is family history,
Oh, for sure.
those stories and traditions passed down through generations.
Yeah, there's a real romance to that.
Absolutely. People love that kind of authenticity, and it builds a real connection to the wine.
Like you're tasting history in a way.
Exactly.
And then there's the whole aspect of artisanal production methods.
Right, highlighting the handcrafted nature of their wines.
Yeah, really emphasizing that care and craftsmanship.
The real differentiator from those mass-produced wines.
And then, of course, the terroir, right?
Oh, absolutely. Terroir is huge.
That's a big word in the wine world.
It is, and for good reason, because it really gets to the heart of what makes a wine unique,
Yeah, so for those who maybe aren't super familiar, can you break down exactly what terroir means?
Sure. So terroir refers to the very specific environmental factors that influence how the grapes grow and ultimately how the wine tastes.
Okay.
So we're talking about things like the soil composition,
Mhm.
the climate,
The
and
sunshine, the rainfall.
exactly, the slope of the vineyard even.
Oh, wow.
All of these things contribute to the terroir, and it's something that small producers can really emphasize because they often have those very specific, unique terroirs that give their wines a distinct character.
And there's a real growing awareness among consumers about the importance of terroir. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. People are definitely paying more attention to where their food and drink comes from these days.
And then on top of all that, we can't forget about the trend toward organic or biodynamic farming.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
It's a big selling point for a certain segment of the market.
It is, and it shows a real commitment to sustainability and to producing wines in a way that's good for the environment.
Right. And I think it aligns with a broader consumer trend towards, being more conscious of where your products come from
Exactly.
and making ethical choices.
And it often translates to higher quality as well.
Yeah. So it's a win-win.
Exactly.
Now, it's not just about the backstory and the philosophy behind the wine, though.
Right.
PPPP also really stressed the importance of attractive labels and packaging.
Oh, yeah. Visuals are absolutely key.
So this is something you've seen play out in the real world.
All the time. A wine bottle is competing with hundreds of others on the shelf.
Right.
And online, too.
Mm-hmm.
So you need something that grabs the eye, that tells a story even before someone picks up the bottle.
What's that first impression?
Exactly. And small producers can really get creative here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They might use a minimalist design to signal a modern, high-end approach, or go for a more traditional look that emphasizes heritage and craftsmanship.
It's branding through visuals.
Exactly. And it needs to be consistent, too.
Right.
The label should reflect the brand's identity and the story they're trying to tell.
So let's say a small winery has nailed their unique story. They've got amazing packaging that catches the eye.
Okay.
How do they actually get their wines in front of the right people?
Right. So that's all about identifying and connecting with those very specific groups of consumers who are most likely to be interested in what they're offering.
Right.
And there are several really effective ways to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Online channels are becoming absolutely crucial. I mean, you can do so much with targeted social media campaigns, creating really engaging content.
Right.
That speaks directly to the interests of your ideal customer. And online advertising is incredibly powerful because you can really pinpoint.
Yeah, you can get very specific with your targeting.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you're not wasting your budget on people who aren't going to be interested.
It makes sense.
Then you've got specialized events like wine fairs and tastings.
Mm-hmm.
These offer fantastic opportunities for direct interaction.
Oh,
You know,
for
well,
sure. It's all about those personal connections.
Exactly. You can talk to people, let them taste your wines, get feedback,
Right.
and start building relationships. And then you can also work with sommeliers restaurants who are passionate about showcasing smaller producers.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get your wines in front of a very targeted audience.
So they become your advocates in a way.
Precisely. They can lend their credibility and their expertise to recommend your wines.
And building that loyal customer base is also a super important part of a long-term strategy.
Oh, yeah. You want people coming back for more.
So how does marketing contribute to that?
Well, it's all about fostering those emotional connections we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Building trust and recognition over time. And this really comes down to consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Being authentic across every single interaction that a customer has with your winery. From the website to the labels,
Right.
to the emails they receive, to the experience they have in the tasting room. It all needs to feel cohesive.
And genuine.
Exactly. And there are some really practical things you can do.
Like what?
Well, loyalty programs are great for rewarding repeat purchases,
Mhm.
and offering exclusive access or wines through a subscription club can really make people feel like they're part of something special.
Yeah, like a VIP experience.
Exactly. And then you can also host special events specifically for your most loyal customers.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
These kinds of initiatives can really strengthen those relationships and encourage people not only to keep coming back for more,
Mm-hmm.
but also to recommend your wines to their friends and family.
It's word-of-mouth
The
marketing.
most powerful kind.
So all of this marketing effort ultimately needs to have a real impact on the bottom line, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a business.
So how does effective marketing actually translate into increased sales and profitability for these smaller wineries?
Well, it all comes down to visibility.
Okay.
Marketing that's done well gets your wines in front of more people.
All right.
It drives traffic to all of your sales channels, whether that's your tasting room,
Your online store.
exactly, your website, any restaurants or retailers that you're working with.
And if your wines are priced strategically, that increased visibility and demand
Right.
should lead to more sales.
Exactly. And hopefully higher profitability.
And we can't overlook the power of a good story.
Oh, storytelling is crucial.
Our sommelier source was really adamant about that.
Yeah, they're right on the money there.
What are some good ways that wineries can share those compelling narratives behind their wines?
Well, I always encourage producers to think about what makes their story unique. Is it the passion that drives their winemaking?
The family's history
Exactly the specific challenges they've overcome.
or the unique character of their terroir?
All of that can be woven into a really engaging narrative.
How do they get that story out there?
There are so many ways. I mean, guided tours of the vineyard and the winery
Yeah.
are fantastic for bringing that story to life.
People love to see where the magic happens.
They do, and commented tastings are a great opportunity to really walk people through the wine.
Connect the flavors to the process.
Exactly, and then all of your branding materials should really reinforce that story.
So that creates a consistent experience.
Exactly. Everything from your website to your brochures to your social media posts, it all needs to tell a cohesive story.
So we've established why marketing is so crucial.
Right.
Now, PPPP breaks down those classic 4 Ps of marketing.
The marketing mix.
Exactly. So let's explore how those apply specifically to the world of wine, starting with product.
Okay.
And it's definitely more than just the liquid in the bottle, right?
Oh, for sure. The product, when it comes to wine, is really this holistic experience. It encompasses so much more than just the juice itself.
So walk me through that.
Okay, so you start with the actual characteristics of the wine.
Right.
The style, the quality level, its sensory profile.
So is it a light and crisp white wine?
Exactly. Or a full-bodied red.
Or maybe a sparkling wine?
Precisely. And then you've got the labels,
Mm,
how they look, the information they provide, whether they clearly communicate the brand's identity.
right. We talked about how important that first impression is.
Exactly. And then the packaging,
The bottle itself.
the shape, the color, the closure they use,
Mm-hmm.
any kind of secondary packaging like a gift box, it all plays a role.
It creates the overall impression.
Exactly. And then all of that needs to tie into the overall visual identity of the brand.
So we're talking about the logo, the color palette.
Exactly. The fonts they use, the tone of voice in their marketing materials, it all needs to be consistent.
So that when someone sees a bottle of wine from that producer, they immediately recognize it.
Exactly. Even if they've never seen that particular bottle before.
And they get a sense of what to expect.
Right. They understand the brand's personality and what they stand for.
Moving on to price now.
Okay.
This must be a particularly tricky area for small producers,
It is.
especially when their production costs might be higher because they're working with smaller volumes.
Yeah. Economies of scale definitely come into play.
So what are some of the really important factors that small producers need to keep in mind when they're setting prices for their wines?
Well, first and foremost, they need to make sure that the price reflects the quality of the wine and the cost of actually producing it, which, as you mentioned, can be higher for small producers.
Mhm.
But they also need to consider where they want to position their brand in the market.
Okay.
Are they going for a premium high-end segment or a more accessible entry-level position?
Right. Different strategies for different target audiences.
Exactly. And they need to think about the perceived value.
Mm-hmm.
How does the consumer perceive the value of their wine relative to its price?
And I imagine they need to keep a close eye on what their competitors are doing as well.
Oh, absolutely. Competitive analysis is essential.
So they need to really understand what similar wines are selling for.
Exactly. And also what other types of beverages might be competing for the consumer's attention.
Right. So it's not just wine versus wine. It's wine versus
Beer, spirits, cocktails.
the whole beverage market.
Exactly.
Okay, so price is clearly a complex area.
It is. There's a lot to consider.
Next up, we've got prasa, which I believe translates to place or distribution.
That's right. It's all about how the wine actually gets to the consumer.
So what are the typical ways that small producers get their wines to market?
Well, the traditional route is through distributors, wholesalers, and retailers.
Okay.
That's how most wines have been sold historically.
And what are some of the challenges that small producers face with that traditional model?
Well, it can be tough for them to get access to those larger distribution networks.
Right.
The big players tend to dominate, and even if they do get in, those distributors and wholesalers often take a significant cut of the profits.
Right. They need their margins.
Exactly. And then they also have limited control over how their wine is ultimately presented and sold at the retail level.
So they lose a bit of control over the brand experience.
They do, and that can be frustrating.
But there are alternatives, right?
Oh, absolutely. And they're becoming increasingly important for small producers.
So what are some of those key alternative distribution channels?
Well, direct sales from the winery itself is a big one.
So that's people coming to the winery.
Exactly. Visiting the tasting room, buying directly from the source.
And they're cutting out all those middlemen.
Exactly. And then there's participation in wine fairs and tastings, which we talked about as a promotional tool, but it's also a sales channel.
Right. You can sell wine right there at the event.
Precisely. And then there's building relationships with restaurants.
Yeah, getting on those wine lists.
That's a big one. And then, of course, the elephant in the room is online sales.
E-commerce.
E-commerce, exactly. It's becoming absolutely essential for many small producers.
I'll definitely dig deeper into that in a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
But first, let's finish up with the fourth P, Promosa.
All right, the all-important communication piece.
This is about getting the word out.
Exactly. Informing potential customers, persuading them to choose your wine, reminding existing customers why they love you.
It's everything that goes into building awareness and driving sales.
Right, and there's a whole spectrum of activities that fall under this umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really a mix of digital and traditional marketing.
Okay.
So on the digital side, you've got things like creating engaging content online.
Blog posts, videos,
Eh,
social media.
Exactly. And then you've got email marketing, which is still a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate the power of email.
They do, but it's a great way to stay in touch with your customers and keep them informed.
And it's relatively low cost.
Exactly. And then there's paid online advertising.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a lot with targeted ads on platforms like Google and Facebook.
Right, so you can reach the people who are most likely to be interested in your wines.
Exactly.
And on the more traditional side, what are some of the key promotional activities?
Well, attending those wine fairs and tastings is crucial.
Yeah, we talked about that.
It's a great way to get in front of potential customers and let them experience your wines firsthand.
Mm.
And then you've got public relations working with journalists and wine critics to get your wines featured in articles and reviews.
Right, getting that third-party validation.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting good reviews. It's also about building relationships with those key influencers in the wine world.
They can really amplify your message.
They can. And then there are things like merchandising,
Yep.
making sure your wines are displayed prominently in stores and restaurants.
Right, so they stand out.
Exactly.
Okay, so lots of different ways to promote a wine.
There are, and the key is to find the right mix of activities that will work best for your specific brand and your target audience.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Definitely not.
Now let's dive a bit deeper into that process element, the distribution side of things.
Okay.
And specifically, let's talk about the growing power of e-commerce.
Right, that's the game changer.
Our sources really highlighted this as a potential game changer
It is.
for smaller producers.
It's leveling the playing field in a lot of ways.
So what makes e-commerce such a catalyst for growth?
Well, one of the biggest things is that it allows small producers to reach a global customer base
Okay.
without having to rely on those traditional distribution channels.
Right, which can be very limiting.
They can be.
So suddenly you're not just limited to selling in your local area,
Exactly. You can sell to anyone, anywhere in the world who's interested in your wines.
subject to local regulations, of course.
Of course, but the potential is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And e-commerce also allows producers to establish a direct relationship with their customers.
Right, so this is the direct-to-consumer model.
Exactly, DTC. And that has a lot of advantages.
Like what?
Well, first of all, it eliminates the need for multiple intermediaries,
Mm-hmm.
each of whom takes a cut of the profits.
So it can really boost profitability.
It can for
Fun
the
to read it.
producer. Exactly. And it also gives them much more control over how their brand is presented and how their wines are sold.
Right. And it allows for a more personalized relationship with the customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can tailor your messaging,
Oh,
you can gather data on customer preferences.
Exactly. You can create a much more personalized experience.
And that's really valuable for building loyalty.
It is. People are more likely to come back for more if they feel like they're being treated as individuals.
It's all about that personal touch.
Exactly.
Now, it's not all rosy, of course.
Right.
There are some challenges to e-commerce as well.
There are.
What are some of the key requirements that small producers need to meet to be successful in this space?
Well, first and foremost, they need a really professional and user-friendly online platform.
Okay.
A website that looks good and is easy to navigate.
It needs to be mobile friendly as well.
Oh, absolutely. People are doing most of their shopping on their phones these days.
So the website needs to be responsive.
Exactly.
And what about showcasing the wines themselves?
High-quality visuals are absolutely essential.
Professional photography.
Yeah, beautiful photos and videos that really showcase the wines.
And those descriptions are really important too.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
You need to paint a picture with words.
Mm-hmm.
Make people really understand what the wine is all about.
Right. Get them excited about trying it.
Exactly. And then, of course, you need a solid digital marketing strategy
Okay.
to drive traffic to your website.
So that's things like SEO, social media marketing, email marketing.
Exactly. And then you need to have efficient and legally compliant logistics in place for actually shipping the wine.
Right. That's a whole other challenge.
It is, especially when you're dealing with alcohol.
But it can be done.
It can't. You just need to make sure you're working with reliable partners.
Okay, let's circle back to the product itself for a moment.
All right.
Our sommelier source really stressed the importance of building wines that enchant.
Yeah, that's a great phrase.
So what goes into that?
Well, it's about creating a complete sensory and intellectual experience
Yep.
that goes beyond just the taste of the wine.
So you're engaging all the senses.
Exactly. You want to create a holistic impression.
So break that down for me.
Okay, so it starts with the intrinsic characteristics of the wine.
Right. The style, the
Quality,
Yeah,
exactly, the sensory profile.
Look, give me an example.
Okay, so let's take two very different white wines.
Okay.
You could have a Sauvignon Blanc from a cool climate region like New Zealand
Okay.
that's going to be very crisp and bright with those really characteristic herbaceous notes.
Mhm.
And then you could have a Chardonnay from a warmer region like California
Okay.
that's going to be much richer and fuller bodied, maybe with some oaky vanilla notes.
So very different flavor profiles.
Very different. And those differences are largely driven by the terroir,
Right.
where the grapes are grown, how they're grown. All of that plays a role.
And then on top of that, you have those visual elements that we talked about,
Exactly. The labels, the packaging.
making sure they're clear and well designed.
Yeah, and that they really communicate the brand's identity.
And maintaining that consistent visual identity across everything is key.
Absolutely.
So that creates that cohesive brand experience.
Exactly.
And in a market that's so crowded, how can small producers make their wines really stand out?
Well, differentiation is absolutely key.
Right, we talked about that.
And it can come from several different angles. One is highlighting the unique grape varieties you might be growing,
Okay.
or the very specific characteristics of your terroir that make your wines distinctive.
Right, so maybe you're growing a rare grape varietal
Exactly. Or your vineyard is located on a particularly unique hillside.
with a special microclimate.
Exactly. And then you can also emphasize innovative winemaking techniques.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, some producers are experimenting with aging wines in amphora, for example.
Instead of oak barrels.
Exactly. It's a very ancient technique.
Oh, wow.
But it's becoming popular again.
And it creates a very different flavor profile.
It does, and it's a good story, too.
Yeah. People are always looking for something new and interesting.
They are. And then, of course, there's the focus on sustainable practices.
Organic, biodynamic.
Exactly. Those certifications can really resonate with consumers.
Yeah, especially those who are environmentally conscious.
Precisely.
And then there's the winery's history and legacy.
Right, those family stories and traditions.
That adds a human element.
It does, and it helps to build that emotional connection with the consumer.
And then finally, you can create those memorable eno-tourism experiences
Yeah.
at your winery.
That's a great way to turn casual visitors into lifelong fans.
So people can come and visit the vineyard.
Exactly. Taste the wines, meet the winemaker, really experience the place where the wines are made.
It creates a lasting impression.
It does.
Now, quality is obviously non-negotiable,
Of course, you have to start with good wine.
but cost is always a factor,
It is.
especially for smaller wineries.
Right. They don't have the same buying power as the big guys.
So how do they find that balance between producing high-quality wines and pricing them appropriately?
It's a balancing act for sure. And it really comes down to understanding your target audience.
Okay.
What are their expectations? What are they willing to pay for?
Mhm.
And then you need to really analyze all of your production costs.
So everything that goes into making a bottle of wine,
Everything from the vineyard management practices to the winemaking process.
packaging, labor costs.
Exactly. Overhead marketing and distribution costs, it all needs to be factored in.
So it's a detailed calculation.
It is, and you need to regularly review and analyze those costs to make sure you're staying profitable.
And then you also need to evaluate your competition.
Right. What are similar wines selling for? And how can you differentiate your wine based on its value proposition?
Right, so it's not just about being the cheapest.
Definitely not. It's about communicating why your wine is worth the price you're asking.
And that's where the story and the terroir come in.
Exactly.
Our sommelier source really emphasized that.
They did.
So tell me more about that.
Well, effectively communicating the winery's history, its origins.
The family's passion.
Exactly. The legacy they're building.
Okay.
All of that helps to create an emotional connection with the consumer.
And it can justify a higher price point.
It can if people understand the value they're getting.
And the terroir plays a big role too.
Absolutely. Highlighting the unique characteristics of the vineyard, the soil, the climate. All of that adds to the story and helps to explain why your wine is special.
And innovation is important too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Even small producers need to stay ahead of the curve.
So how can they do that?
Well, they need to be aware of evolving market trends.
Right, so what are people drinking?
Exactly. What are the new hot varietals? What are the new wine styles?
Hmm.
Are people interested in organic wines or vegan wines?
Or maybe lower alcohol options. So
Yes,
they need to adapt.
they do. And they can also experiment with new grape varieties or blending techniques
Hmm.
or invest in new technologies in the vineyard or the winery.
To improve quality or efficiency.
Exactly. And there's a lot of innovation happening in packaging as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So you've got sustainable packaging options,
Hmm.
interactive labels that provide more information about the wine,
Oh, cool.
and even different bottle formats.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting shapes and sizes out there.
There are people are really getting creative.
Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper into price now.
All right.
Our sommelier source was very adamant about the importance of truly understanding all those production costs.
Yeah. You got to know your numbers.
So what kind of detailed breakdown are we talking about here?
Well, you really need to break it down into all the different categories of expenses.
Okay.
So starting with the vineyard, you've got your fixed costs.
Like land rental equipment depreciation.
Exactly. And then you've got your variable costs.
Like labor, fertilizers, pest control.
Precisely. And then you need to move on to the winery costs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's energy consumption, winemaking supplies, equipment maintenance.
Aging cost.
Exactly. If you're aging your wines in oak barrels, that can get expensive.
Yeah, oak barrels are not cheap.
They're not. And then you've got your packaging costs.
Mm-hmm. Bottles, corks, labels.
Exactly. Capsules, any secondary packaging.
So gift boxes, things like that.
Right. And then you've got your labor costs.
Mm-hmm. Everyone from the vineyard workers to the winemakers.
To the administrative staff.
And then your overhead costs.
Right. Rent, utilities, insurance, all of that.
And finally, marketing and distribution costs.
Exactly. It all adds up.
It does.
And once you've got all those costs figured out, you need to calculate your cost per bottle.
Okay.
That's essential for setting your prices.
So you know how much it costs to produce each bottle of wine.
Exactly. And then you can start thinking about your margins and your pricing strategy.
And that's where the competitive analysis comes in.
Exactly. You need to know what your competitors are charging for similar wines.
Right. And what other types of beverages might be competing for the consumer's dollar.
Exactly.
But ultimately, the focus should be on differentiating your wine based on its value proposition.
Right.
Not just trying to be the cheapest option.
Exactly. You want to communicate why your wine is worth the price you're asking.
And pricing isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, is it?
No, it's not. You probably need to adjust your pricing depending on the sales channel.
Okay, so walk